Good morning. It looks like there are a few attendees here already. So let me just ask if you all can see me and hear me and see my screen. If you can you type something in the chat or the question window? Thank you, Lisa, for letting me know. We've got a few minutes before we have to start. When we do start, I'll sort of start over as if we're, doing a nice little introduction because we'll do a recording. So when that goes out, we want it to look all good and happy. So I'll start over with greeting everybody once that happens. But I just want to make sure that everybody's doing okay and that we'll be ready to go here in the near future. Okay. Okay, it is 10 a.m. But it looks like we've only got 17 people who have joined so far, and we've got about 75 registered. So I'm going to give it another couple of minutes for people to show up and hopefully join us. And so we'll just hang in there for a little bit. Oh, thank you, Sharon, for letting me know that you could hear me and see everything. Okay, well, it looks like the numbers are holding pretty steady. So we'll just consider it an intimate group today, and maybe some of those other people registered so that they can get the recording easily after after the webinar series. So we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me this morning for our Shepherd Staff Finance webinar series. We're starting today with Basic Principles and Chart of Accounts. I'm Kimberly. I'll be your hostess. I hopefully will give you lots of good and useful information, maybe some that you don't already know. Some of you I know are probably old hats at Shepherd Staff and already know a lot of this, but there may be some of you who haven't really been using it very long and don't know all the inner details, and I'm glad to be able to help with that. Like I said, I'm Kimberly. I've been with the company for a little over 3 years, and I just really have enjoyed working with all of you. It's really a privilege to work with the churches and know that I'm doing a job that's actually helping the kingdom. So thank you all. I very much have enjoyed all of you that I've talked to on the phone. So let's go ahead and start talking about our situation here. So we're going to have 3 webinars in the finance series here. And we're starting today with your basic finance principles, accounting principles, and talking about your chart of accounts and Shepherd Staff. So we will go ahead and start looking at our slides here. First, let me get in the right place. First thing to note, all the webinars are going to be recorded, and you will get that notification after they are available for viewing. You'll get a link sent to you. They'll also be posted in the Shepherd Staff Help Center, which hopefully you all know how to get to, but I'll show you during the webinar here. And they'll also be included in Shepherd Staff when you go to help and choose the training videos. You'll be able to see them there. They won't be available immediately. We do have to get them edited and prepared and uploaded, but they will be probably maybe by the end of the week, if not by early next week. So that's usually a question that pops up during the webinar. So I just want to make sure it's out there that we will be sure to have them recorded and available to you. So I am your host. I'm Kimberly. As I said, I've been here for about 3 years. I am happy to be with you this morning, and I apologize for my ums because I can hear them coming out of my mouth as I say them. So one thing to note, all phones and microphones have been muted. You have a question window in the webinar software. You can click on that and type in any questions as we go, and I have a little co-host who's along with me, who is Taylor Brown. And she is fantastic. She has been really, really good to me since I started and helped me learn a lot. So she's here and she will hopefully be able to help answer some of those questions as we go. And also we'll have hopefully a little time for questions and answers at the end of the webinar as well. So just type those in, and as we get to them, we will talk about them. Either Taylor will answer them, we'll answer them at the end of the webinar, or if all else fails, I can send you an email afterwards to get those questions answered. So thank you, Taylor, for joining me. She's had to do a last-minute replacement for our manager, who was not able to be here this morning. So thanks a lot. I appreciate your help. So let's talk about what we're going to be doing today. So first, we're going to talk about our class agenda. That's this right now. And then we're going to talk a little bit about accounting principles and how they're used in Shepherd staff, or what accounting principles Shepherd staff uses. And then we'll talk about getting around in the finance module of Shepherd staff and some of the conventions that are used there. And we'll go over your chart of accounts and how you can add to your chart of accounts and how to organize your chart of accounts using the major and minor groups in the numbering categories. So we'll talk about that too. And then we'll go over budgets and how to add them and some of the views and reports that you can do related to budgets. There will be another whole webinar on reporting as well. So we'll see some of the basics on budgets, but you'll get more on reports in general tomorrow. So then at the very end, there's going to be, we're calling it a quiz, but don't panic. It has no bearing on you. It's basically a way for us to find out if we're presenting the material well. And so it'll help me to know if I need to focus on some details that I might have missed or anything like that. So hopefully it'll help me improve my webinar skills as we go. At the very end, we'll have the time for that Q&A session. And if we run over time, that's okay with me. As long as you're able to stick around, we'll do that. So let's go ahead and get started. First, we're going to be talking about our accounting principles. So the first thing to note is that Shepherd staff uses fund accounting. And what that means is that a fund or a book, which we default now in Shepherd staff to calling it a book, partially because that makes it more distinct from the offering funds that you set up in your contributions module. So funds in contributions are not the same thing as your fund accounting fund in the finance module. So we've given it the name book as well. So, and you can choose between those options in terms of naming, but it's a way to keep it distinct. So a fund or a book is a single accounting entity. So like a company, a set of books or a chart of accounts with its own assets, liabilities, income, expenses, etc. So if you have your church, most churches are probably only going to have one book. But there might be a church that has, say, a school attached that has its own set of bank accounts and does its own separate finances. So that might be a separate book that you set up in Shepherd staff for the school. So if you do that, then anytime you would maybe transfer money between those two books, you would consider that a loan that you have to pay back. So it's not like, because they're not the same financial entity, that money doesn't just flow back and forth. So next thing in our accounting principles is to talk about our finance year or our fiscal year. That can be any 12-month period, but it usually is either a calendar year or a non-calendar year, because that's really the only options. So in a calendar year, that's going to be January to December, all 12 months. And then a non-calendar year could start pretty much anywhere, but like as example, it could be August 1st through July 31st, or July 1st through June 30th. So if you did that, then whatever the end month of your fiscal year is the year that fiscal year is. So you'll see that like if my fiscal year is August through July, and it's already past August, then I'm in my 2025 fiscal year. That's all that means. So next thing, let's talk about cash accounting. So cash accounting doesn't mean that you can only pay with cash or use cash. It just means that you could do everything with cash because of the timing. So most churches do this, and that's what we are basing Shepherd staff on. So your income or your expenses are recorded when the money is received or spent. So that makes it easier to track the money that's coming in and going out at any given time, and you don't have to worry about explaining why your balance doesn't look like what right now it is, and you don't have to worry about if I've already kind of pre-planned and doing it, if I'm not doing everything, if I'm doing everything on account or whatever, then I might run into cash flow problems. So using cash accounting, meaning you're spending the money when you're spending it, you're receiving the money when you're receiving it, that just makes everything a lot simpler. So that's what we focus on in Shepherd staff. So next thing, next principle that we'll talk about that Shepherd staff uses is double entry bookkeeping. It sounds a little complicated. It's not as complicated as it sounds once you get used to it, but I'll tell you what, I still keep a chart pinned to my wall to help me with the debits and credits. So what double entry bookkeeping means is, so basically anytime you do a transaction, you're going to be logging it against two accounts. So there are debits and credits, and they have to be equal. So you may have 2 accounts, you may have 10 accounts, but as long as all of the debits on one side and the credits on the other side match, then that's fine. So like if you were depositing money into your bank account, then let's say it was an offering batch. You might have had 4 or 5 different offering funds, and those would be represented by your income account. And so if you're depositing money into the asset account, that'll be the total that's being deposited. And then you'll have in that offset account, which is the income account, you'll have maybe 3 or 4 or 5, whatever, different income accounts, but the total of all of those adds up to what's being deposited. And that's how you can track and make sure that it balances out. So next thing we want to talk about is the account types in Shepherd staff. Pretty much are the same as what you would see anywhere else in your accounting system, but we'll talk a little bit about the exception there. But we're going to start with your most basic, which is your asset accounts. That's your very first thing you need in order to be able to receive or spend money, is mostly bank accounts and things. So assets are what your congregation owns. So there are 2 types. They can be your monetary assets, which is what you have in your bank account, or in your cash box for your petty cash or whatever. And then fixed assets are a different thing. That's non-monetary assets such as, well, let's talk about your money in your checking and savings account under current assets, and your certificates of deposit, investments, things like that. That's all your current assets. Then your fixed assets are the things that are like your church building or land that you own, or like any other kinds of physical things that are assets to your church. Now, Shepherd staff generally focuses on the monetary assets. You can create accounts, asset accounts, for those fixed assets. Most people don't, and if somebody asks me, I generally say that I wouldn't, but you can. And if you do, you just need to make sure that you're continuing to do whatever you need to do to track the value of those accounts. Otherwise, they've just been created and sit out there, and your reports are the same every time. So it's generally, most people just track their current monetary assets in Shepherd staff. So let's talk about the next account type. That's liabilities, and that's what your church owes. So assets are what you own, liabilities are what you owe. So that could be short-term debt, such as payroll taxes and health savings accounts and things like that, things that you're like withholding from checks so that you can then pay off to the government or to the insurance company or whatever. And then also credit cards. So you can create a liability account to represent your credit card. And then whenever you do payments on your credit card, you can create transactions for each of those payments. And then when you pay off your credit card, you can do a different transaction to show that being paid off. So we can talk about that in your transactions onboarding this afternoon. So long-term debt is going to be something like a mortgage or a car payment or any kind of loan like that. So those are the two kinds of things that you'll generally see in your liabilities. So anything that is not really yours, you're going to have to pay it back. That's a liability. The next account type is equity accounts. This is what kind of shows the difference between, so your assets equal liabilities plus equity. So that means this is what balances out your accounting equation. It's how you can tell what is left over of your assets once you've paid off all of your liabilities, for example. Or assets minus liabilities, that's the second one that I just said. So use of equity accounts is not required in Shepherd Staff. Shepherd Staff calculates your book equity for you. So you can create equity accounts if you want to, but it's recommended that you only do so if you are or are under the supervision of a CPA, since Shepherd Staff pretty much takes care of showing you the equity on its own. So we'll talk about that a little bit in some of our, in our reporting onboarding, we will. So the equity accounts are available. You can create them, but it's not necessary, and it may cause confusion if you have Shepherd Staff trying to calculate it and you're trying to calculate it separately. So if you don't know equity really clearly or aren't a CPA or whatever, it might be best just to leave that to Shepherd Staff to handle. So then income accounts, they are tracking accounts. So they're going to show you the money that you've taken in during the fiscal year. So generally, like if you're doing a deposit, you're going to do it against an income account, and it's going to raise up your income account so that you can track how much money you've taken in for the year. So an income account is something that you can budget for. So let's say you have a missions fund that you have in your offerings funds. It could correspond to an income account, and that income account would track how much money you're taking in, and you can budget what you expect to take in for the year to help you decide what you can spend for the year. So those can be budgeted. So an example, your offerings in general, interest. So offerings, you could have several income accounts based on your offerings. For example, that missions fund, you can have a different category for every one of them and have different income accounts for those if you want to. But you could also have income from interest or from rental property or any other kind of business type of thing that you have. Like if you had a school, you might have income from your school. If it was a school that had a separate set of books, it wouldn't be recorded on this one. But if it was just like a part of the church's books, then you would have its own separate income account maybe. So every income account is going to begin the fiscal year at 0, and then it's going to count up how much money comes in throughout the fiscal year, so that you can report on that for the current fiscal year. And at the end of the year, you'll be able to report all of your income and report on that, and then it'll start over at 0 again for the next year. An expense account is a very similar thing. It is another tracking account. It records your spending during the fiscal year. That'll be an offset for a check or a payment generally. And that's another thing that you can budget. So you can budget for what you expect to take in, and you can budget for what you expect to spend. Some more examples of that. That might be salaries for employees. It might be your communion supplies and materials for church programs, everything that you use at the church. Also things like cleaning supplies at the church, or your utilities, or office supplies, postage, etc. And again, those begin each fiscal year at 0 so that they can track the expenses for the current fiscal year through the end of the year, and then they start over at 0 again. So dedicated accounts are a special proposition in Shepherd Staff that's not the same as every other accounting software. A dedicated account is showing you money that is reserved for a specific purpose. It might be a memorial or something that, like say you have a building fund that's dedicated to that purpose and you can't use that money for anything else. You would want to put that in a dedicated account to show that it's its own pool of money, basically. Those balances will carry over, so they don't start over at 0 like an income or an expense account, but you can use them as the offset for both incoming and outgoing money, and they can be budgeted just like income or expense accounts if you choose. Those are basically, the money itself is still in your asset account, it's still in your bank account, but it's showing in the dedicated account as being, here's how much money of that asset account is dedicated to this purpose, and it'll show on your balance sheet alongside your liabilities and your equity. So next, let's talk about your account organization. That is going to give you, we have numbering for your accounts. Let's talk about it that way. So each account has a number, and it's going to look something like this. So the little pieces of the number, as you see, we've got them divided into little chunks here. So these three are separate, and these three are sort of tied together, but this is separate from this, and we'll talk about that in each of these slides. I do want to say I had a conversation with a customer recently who said that they kind of wished we had focused a little bit more on this in the training that she had seen. So I want to make sure we talk about it really thoroughly here. Because the account numbering is how you organize your chart of accounts, which will allow you to report on your chart of accounts or on all of your accounts in a way that is organized the way you want it to be. So the first little set, that 01 that's showing in this example, we'll talk about that first. That's your fund number. So when we talked about your funds or your books, and how you could have more than one if you have two financial entities that you're tracking. So if you had your church fund or book, that might be 01, and then you might have your school be 02. If you had some other thing, like you have a cemetery or something else that has its own set of books, you might even have an 03. So that's how you'd identify which of the funds or books you're in. So which chart of accounts you should be looking at. And then the next number you'll see is the account type. And you'll see over here a list of the numbers that correspond to each account type. I'll be real honest, I don't know why there's no number 4, but there's not. So you have assets are 1. So if it was 011, that would mean it's your first book and it's an asset account. If it's 012, it's your first book and a liability account. If it's 023, it would be your second book and an equity account, etc. on down the line. So that number right there is going to tell you what the account type is. So the next set of numbers, this is where we get into organization. So Shepherd Staff provides ways to group your accounts by categories, and the categories are separated into major groups and minor groups so that you can have a major group. Say if I have assets and I want to organize my assets, I might say a major group is the bank that I have some of my bank accounts in. Like, let's say it's First National Bank or whatever. I could have a major group called that, and then I could have a minor group that said checking accounts or something like that. And then if I had more than one checking account, then I would handle that in my sequence view. So we'll talk about that. So you have a name of the account, and then you also have these two categorization views here. Let's say we were talking about offerings. So my major group might be offerings, and then I might have a minor group that's for, say, let's say education, for example. And then, so we'll talk about that. Minor groups next. So if I have, that's like a subcategory underneath. So if I have a major group that's offerings and a minor group that's education, I might still have multiple accounts under that. So my minor group is just basically a subcategory that goes under that major group. The minor groups are subgroups and they only exist under that major group. So if you had something else, if you had more than one major group that you needed a similar name to, you'd have to create a separate minor group for it. And then we have a sequence. So this is where you'd see your first account that you create under there obviously will be O1, right? But then you can create more than one. So this is where if you had your major group of education or of offerings, your minor group of education, then you might have a Sunday school income account. So this is where people have given money for Sunday school. That might be O1. O2 might be one that's for VBS or something like that. So that's where the sequence number comes in. And then you'd name those for Sunday school and for VBS. So hopefully that helps you think about how you might organize your accounts. So this is what your full account number would look like. So this is an income account, so it's an 015, right? So the 01 is the fund, that's my church. 5 is the account type, that's my income. Major group, let's say, is education. Minor group is Sunday school. And then sequence is, major group is offerings, minor group is education, and then 03, let's say, is Sunday school or it's VBS or whatever. So that's our full naming thing. And then we might have, so if this is 03, then there's obviously an 01 and an 02 that might be, if this is VBS, then it might be Sunday school and it might be some other like Bible study type of income account. So we're going to go ahead then, and hopefully that helps with the organization and makes sense of what you use those for. And let's talk a little bit now about actually navigating the finance module. We'll actually get into Shepherd Staff now. We won't do a quiz just yet. We're going to go. There we go. Oops. Over to Shepherd Staff. Sorry about that. So we're in Shepherd Staff here. I'm assuming that most of you have been in Shepherd Staff before, so you know that we're just going to click the F to open the finance module. And let me just pause for a moment here and say that right now our webinars are all going to be with the latest version of Shepherd Staff, and I'll show you real quick here. If we go up to Help and we click About, you'll see that I am on release 9.1. So if you're not yet on 9.1, excuse me, you can upgrade to 9.1 as long as you have an active support contract and your database is registered. On the login screen, just click Check for Updates and follow the prompts there, and it'll get you upgraded. Excuse me. Just take a quick drink. I apologize. So just so you know that all of the webinars will be on version 9.1. I'm going to, now that we're trying to look at Shepherd Staff, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera so that you'll get enough of the view of the screen. Hopefully that'll help make it a little easier to see everything. So in this view, you see this is our finance module, and you'll see across the top, we're going to just talk about how to get around in the finance module real quick here. Across the top, we have our different tabs. So activity, this is where you do all your transactions. So we'll see a lot of that this afternoon. Accounts, this is where your chart of accounts is going to be. So we'll see that a whole bunch momentarily. I'm going to skip over it a little bit so that you can see there's this section for receivables. Not a lot of you will probably use this, but we have it available for people who do accounts receivable for, say, their school or something like that. So this might be one that you would have for just one particular book that you use it for. But you would be able to do accounts receivable in here. The Plan Analyze tab is a lot of tools that we will see a little bit of this in a little later in the morning here. We're going to talk about budgeting and some of those reports and things there when we do that. And then other reports, this is where a lot of your main financial reports will be found. This is going to be a part of tomorrow's webinar mostly, but we'll take a look at a few things. And then tools and settings is where you can make your preferences in terms of here's where you would set up your finance here, for example. If you have recurring transactions, when you want a reminder. This is also where you would decide if you wanted to call your book or funds, books or funds. You can also decide which book or fund, if you have more than one, opens automatically when you log in. And then over here, you'll see that there's several other tools that you can use in the finance module, and we'll look at some of those in the onboarding tomorrow, or webinar tomorrow, pardon me. You'll also see over here off to the right that there's some options here that these are some customizations you can do. First of all, under Actions, this is a drop down, and you can use it to kind of do some things. If some of you had older versions of Shepherd Staff, this might be similar to the I Want To view that they used to have in the older versions. You can select one of those and click the star to make it. So for example, I always do this. I select print checks and well, my view is not showing it. But anyway, you can select so that you can put it down here under My Actions, and it'll always be there, so you don't even have to click the drop down if you want to. So these are different ways that you can choose to open a view. Under My Views, this is where if you save a view, so let's say I wanted to see a certain configuration of things, I could do that and save it here, and I could do the same thing under my reports with reports that I'm looking at. I could save them, and I could save them down here. We'll talk a lot more about all of that in the reports onboarding. So you'll see in activity, in each of them, we might have other views underneath that are sort of sub options. We're going to talk a little bit about just these what we're seeing up here. So you have, in most of the views, you're going to have a search function. There's you can search for two different keywords or dates or whatever at the same time if you want to. Well, you wouldn't search for two dates, but a keyword and a date or something like that to help you find something specific within this chart. You'll notice that it's the checkbox here says that I'm only seeing the last 24 months. If I needed to see older data, I could uncheck that box and it would show me my whole history of data. I apologize, I have my screen set to be enlarged so that everybody can see things, and it's making some of the buttons and things look a little wonky, but you'll see that I have filters here, like it says account instead of account. I have filters here where I could say what particular account I want to see these transactions from. I can go over here and say I only want to see cleared transactions, things like that. So I have filters and search options, and I can also switch between books all within most of these views. So that is the basics of that. Let's go ahead and talk about your chart of accounts. So we're going over here to accounts, and you'll see that it defaults to this account tree with everything kind of compressed down. I'll be honest, I usually skip over this view and go to either directly to whatever account type I want to look at or to the all accounts view, but I'll show you what this looks like. You can either click the little plus sign and kind of open things up and look at this, or you can click this and it'll open or close all of it. And then you can see everything. So this is my chart of accounts in the accounts tree view. I'm going to click on the all accounts view, and it's going to show me the same data, but it's going to show it more in a simplified view. And you'll notice that there were buttons over here in the other view. Their buttons are down here in this view. Most of the views have them down here. These are ways that you can kind of interact with all of the accounts that you have here, or with the data. So for example, exporting my whole screen to Excel, or printing something based on this data. So I'm in my chart of accounts. I've got all accounts selected. If I click print, it's going to give me a preview of my full chart of accounts and all of the information related to that chart. So you'll see that I've got my account numbers, and we talked about how those are organized. And then there's the name of each account, and then what kind of account it is. And obviously there's several pages, so that's why we only go through a few income accounts. And then the major and minor groups that those accounts belong to. And then we have the beginning balance, the activity so far this year, and the current balance of each of these accounts. And then there's another thing that we'll look at here in a little bit about church body or responsibility codes that you can use to help even further organize your accounts. So we have data about the accounts that we can see here, and that's the same kind of data that we're seeing in this view here. So if we scroll on over, we can see the rest of that information here. So for any given account, I can also click activity and see transactions that belong to that account. I can edit the account, I can add to the account, or I can delete an account. Most of the time you can't delete an account if it has activity. If it's had any activity on it, you would only be able to deactivate it. So let's talk some more about the actual accounts and how we create them. So if you want to create an account, we just go right down here to the bottom and click add. Very simple. And let's go ahead and we're going to create a new asset account first, so you can see what that looks like. So we're selecting asset, we're clicking select, and it's just going to pop up this box, and it's going to give us the options to give it a name. So we're going to give it a name. It's going to be, let's say this is a Farmers Bank CD. I don't know why I don't think I need that apostrophe there. So Farmers Bank CD. So you see that I have some Farmers Bank accounts already there. So we're going to go ahead and find the major groups and minor groups that those go with. So you'll see when I select my major group that Farmers Bank is already there. So we're going to go ahead and select that. And under minor group, you'll see that I can say either, yeah, I'm just going to give the same name to my minor group, or I have some options here. But let's say that I want to create a new minor group so that I can categorize it even separately. I can go ahead and click this little pencil icon, and that'll open up an option for me to give a new name. And you'll see that it's saying group number 3 because I've already got 0, 1, and 2 in there. So let's say I can call this one investments. And I'm going to click add. And then I'm going to go ahead and select that investments as my new minor group for this account. And now, because that minor group, it's the first one, so I'm going to select sequence 01. And I do apologize. It is, since I've enlarged my screen, things are not as visible as they should be. So if this was a bank account that I was going to be using for transactions, then I would select this box, and you'll see that I'd be able to override numbers for, like, if I had a checkbook for this account, I could say here, the first check that I'm going to write out of this is going to be number 1, 2, 3, 4, and then that would show up when I create a check for this account. But since this is a CD, it's not really a bank account, but I could do that for all of the different kinds of transaction types that I might do in that account if it was. So I'm going to uncheck that box since it's not. We're going to say it is active. We're not going to put a beginning balance this time because it is a CD and we created it by writing a check and depositing it into this CD. So we're going to show you how to do that in the next onboarding this afternoon. But I will show you how to add a beginning balance for another option here in a moment. So this is where the church body and responsibility codes can be selected. You'll see that I don't have any set up right now. So let's say that we had a committee with our church that was responsible for investing money. So then we could say, okay, well then that church body is going to be investment committee. Oop, pardon me. I can add that, I can select it, and I can say that that is now assigned to that committee. And then if there were other accounts that that committee was in charge of, I could add that same church body code to that to those accounts as well. And then I could provide reports based on that church body code to the people that are responsible for that. And I can do that for any of my account types. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save here. And you'll see that now it's right there in my list, and it's an asset account. It has no balance so far. Major group is Farmers Bank. Minor group is now investments. It's not inactive, and it's not a bank account. And you'll see if I scroll over here that it has a church body code now. So that's an asset account. We will talk next about liabilities. Very similar situation. However, let's say that we needed, I have a lot of liabilities set up already for withholdings from paychecks and things. So you'll see that I have tax ones and health insurance and retirement plans and things like that. But we also have a credit card that the church uses, my imaginary church here. And so I need to get that entered into the system. And we've been using it, and I never actually put it in here. So now we have to get it in there. So I'm clicking Add again. I'm going to go to Liability. I'm going to click Select, and I'm going to give that a name. I'm going to say Central Trust Visa, and it's going to be under, let's see, we don't have payroll tax deductions or payroll deductions for this one, so we're going to add a major group again. We're going to say that this is debt, because that's what credit cards are, right? So the major group is going to be debt. I'm going to click Add, and then I'm going to click Select. The minor group, we're going to create one for that, and we're going to say that it's credit card. And we're going to add that. We're going to select it as my minor group. And that way, if I had other credit cards that the church needed to record, it could still be under debt, and it could be under credit card, but then it would be another sequence. So this is the first one, so we're selecting 01. And you'll see that this time I have a checkbox that says this is a charge account. And this time we really do want to use it as a charge account. So we're going to click that box, and we can decide if there's a number that we want to put in for that. So let's say that the first number would be 1234 again. So then you'll see, since I said we've already been using this credit card, it might have a balance on it. So we're going to say that this one has a beginning balance of $500. So now I have all of that, and let's say that we have somebody that's responsible for that account. Let's say that it's me. We'll just say that Kimberly is responsible for that account. So we're going to add that. We're going to select me, and that way I can say I can report on everything that I'm responsible for, or someone else can. And we'll click Save here. And you'll see that you get a warning. It says the beginning balance should only be used when transferring information from a previous accounting system. Well, since this was never entered into this accounting system, that's pretty much the situation that we are in for this particular credit card. So in other situations, you should probably use a journal entry or deposit or whatever to create that beginning balance. Are you sure you want to add a beginning balance? And we're going to say yes, because we owe that $500 and we didn't have it recorded anywhere else. So here's that, and it's showing up right here in my liabilities, and because it's in a different major and minor group, you'll see that it's at the bottom of the list of liabilities. So you'll see that right now we've got everything sorted by number, so each of the accounts is kind of organized by your major and minor groups that you have created. So that is the liability accounts. So you'll notice that I don't have any equity accounts created here. And like I said earlier, we have in the reports that Shepherd staff creates, it tracks your, it, pardon me with talking, it tracks your equity for you. And so you don't really have to have those. If you needed to create one, if you wanted to create one, you could still do that by clicking add and selecting equity. And you could create an equity account for your land or for whatever you wanted to keep track of as equity. So again, that would be very similar, although there's not a checkbox to make it a bank account or to make it a charge account because that's not an option as equity, but you could select a beginning balance or you could create it with a journal entry. Again, we recommend just letting Shepherd staff take care of that for you. But it's an option that you have here. And let's look now at income. So here you see I have a whole list of income accounts coming down all the way to here. And let's say that we wanted to add an income account for the children's ministry. So I'm going to click add. I'm going to select income. Again, this is very simple and straightforward. Children's minute. Whoop, too many minutes. Goodness, I can't type. And that's going to be active. We're going to select a major group here. Let's say that it comes from offerings. And then the minor group will be under ministry. And then that's children's ministry. So when there's already a major and minor group, you just select them. And when I click this drop down, you'll see that the first, you can just barely tell because of the way the view is right now. But you can see that that 5 is the first option that I have to select. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. That means that there's already 4 other ones under offerings and ministry. Now I could choose a church body or a responsibility code to add to these if I want to. And then I would just click save. Now if I wanted to add a bunch of them and I was creating a chart of accounts from scratch, if I check this add multiple box, then when I click save, it'll stay right here and let me add another account. So for example, I'll show you what that looks like. So that's if I wanted to add a whole bunch of income accounts, it would stay right here and I can put the next name in. And if it goes under offerings and ministry, I don't even have to change that because it saved it from the last one. But I could still also change that if I needed to. So, but we're going to say no, we're going to finish. Also, just so you know, if you needed to, you can add a note attached to any account that you create for any information that you'd like to save as part of that account's record. So we're going to go ahead and click finish. So that's our new children's ministry income account. You'll notice it didn't create at the bottom of the chart because it is filling in numerical order based on my major and minor groups. So since it is the 5th one under ministry, so you'll see here's where the ministry ones start, and I've got my sequence 01, so ministry or offerings, ministry, 01, 02, 03, 04, and now 05. So those are my offerings ministry ones. You'll see that I also have other offerings ones. So here's offerings funds, and then offerings education, and then offerings ministry, etc. So you can kind of keep track of things by both the major groups and the minor groups. And let's go ahead now and add an expense account. Very similar sort of situation. Let's say that we're going to add one for study Bibles. So we're going to just call it study Bibles. This time it's an expense account. We selected, right? It's going to be active. Major group, this is going to be under church expenses. And here we'll say, it doesn't really belong under any of these. And I don't feel like we need a whole separate minor group. So I'm just going to say church expenses again. So we're going to select the minor group as just being the same as the major group in this particular instance. And then we're going to select number 1 as the sequence. And we could say whoever was responsible for that, what church body or person is responsible, or whatever we want to use these for. It's active. We're not going to add multiple, but let's say that we projects and senior gifts. I don't know. We could put something in there to say what we thought what we wanted to make sure that we knew that that was for. That's probably not the kind of note that you would necessarily put in an account. You might put that in like a transaction memo or something, but I've just gone ahead and added that just to show you how you can add a note and it will be pinned there. And anytime you go to look at that, you can see that note. So cancel, I'm gonna go ahead and save. And then let me show you. If you edit it, it looks exactly the same. So down here, instead of add, I'm going to click edit and look back at that study Bibles option. So if I decided I wanted to change it and actually give it its own minor group, or if I decided I wanted to assign it to somebody and make myself responsible for it or whatever, I could come in, edit that, and save it. I could also look and see that that note is still there. I could delete that note if I needed to, but I'm just going to update it as being now I'm responsible for that one. So that's most of our accounts, but we talked about our last account type, which is dedicated. So down here, that's these 017 accounts, and you'll see that we have a few, but we let's say we need one for, we have opened a food pantry, and people are going to give money that's specifically for that food pantry. That's not going to be for anything else that we might use it for. So we're going to go ahead and sequester that, tell our system that that money is dedicated to that particular purpose. So I'm going to click add here, and I'm going to create my dedicated account. I'm going to go ahead and select that. And so now you'll see that the account number is starting to fill in, and it's 017, and we're going to say food pantry. And it's going to be active. We're not going to give it a beginning balance because we're going to start filling it in based on other information. So let's call this is going to be a new major group. We're going to call it community action. And we'll go ahead and add that and then select it. And then the minor group, let's say that this is, so before when we had, we didn't really need a separate minor group, we went ahead and just called it the same thing as the major group. Some people might instead create a minor group that's the same thing as the name of the account. So let's say, and that's just because I don't need 2 levels of organization in this situation. So I could do that if I needed to. Like if I just can't think of an extra level of organization that I need for it. But let's say that instead of food pantry, we'll say benevolence. And we'll add that, and we'll select it. And then that's going to be our sequence number 1 again. And we could select who was in charge of that again if we needed to. And it's active. We're not giving it a beginning balance, so let's go ahead and save it. So another thing that we might do with that note area is say established 2024, something like that, for whatever information we might want to know later. So now we have that dedicated account. We have our new income and expense accounts. And later this afternoon, when we do our second webinar, you'll be able to see how transactions might go into those accounts. And let's now look at budgets. So we're going to go to plan and analyze. So for your income and your expense accounts, and also for those dedicated accounts, you can create budgets. There's no requirement to create a budget for any particular account. So that's entirely up to your church. Some people only create budgets for their expense accounts and not their income accounts, and some people don't create any budgets for dedicated accounts, but you have the ability to do it for any of them. So, and you can also, at any time during the fiscal year, add or update. So if you created a new account in the middle of the year and you wanted to start entering a budget for it, you could come here, find the account that you added and add that budget. So let's say we wanted to budget that Bibles one that we created in expenses. Let's see, where did I put that? Study Bibles. I'm going to sort by name instead of by number so I can find it. There we go, because I couldn't remember the numbering for it. So that's another thing that you can do on any of these views. You can either search or sort by name or by number. So if I wanted to update this, I would just come in here and I could say either I could go here and I could type in the numbers that I wanted to be my budgets for each month, or I could put a total up here. Let's say I wanted to put $1,200 up there, and then I can use a calculation method that says equal monthly amounts, and that'll fill in $100 a month. Or I could say, if this wasn't a new account, if I had actuals or something, I could base it on what I actually spent last year or what I actually budgeted for last year. So I have kind of options there. I will show you what that looks like in a moment, but that's the quick and easy, and I'll just show you that for this Study Bibles one. So we're gonna click Save, and you'll see that it says Advance on Save, and that means it's going to take me right to the next one that's in the list. So I'm going to close out of this, and I'm going to start over with 2025 so that we can, let's go back to sorting by number. So you'll see that right now I'm showing the current year 2024. I'm going to go switch to next year so that you can see now all of my stuff is blank, and I've got my list of all of my accounts, and I can decide what I need to budget for. I can start at the very top, and I can just double click to open this one, or I could click Edit at the bottom, and I can do the same thing that I did with that expense account, but this time we're doing income. So I can say I expect to take in X amount of money for the general fund as a total for the year, or we can see that I've got prior year actuals and prior year budgets here, and you can see those listed a little more detail down here by month. So let's say I want to copy last year's budget. So last year, this is what we budgeted per month, and I'd be done. Or let's say instead that I want to base it on the prior year's budget, but I want to add 3% because I think we're going to do better than we did last year. So I have that option. Or I could instead, let's say that's what we do for our general fund. I'm going to go ahead and click Save with that Advance on Save checked, and it's going to take me to my next one. Now it wants me to budget an expense account for my health insurance. Well, that's interesting. Okay. So let's say we don't have prior year budget for that one. It wasn't budgeted before. So, but we do have actuals. So let's say I want to do copy my prior year's actuals because I know that that's what my insurance is going to cost me again this year. So I could do that. And that would fill it all in. But you'll notice that it doesn't seem to all be filled in properly. So I don't think that we were doing all of our information correctly last year. So maybe we put it under the wrong account last time. So now we're not getting accurate numbers. So let's say instead I want to go ahead and do, I want to make it the same across the board. So let's say that we want, I want it to be 15,000 and I want it to be equal monthly amounts. So that's $1,250 across the board. So in some of those months last year, we didn't do it all at the right time. So we had to fill it in on other months. So now we've got it all steady across the board and we know that we've got the right amount. So we could do it that way. We could do any of these other options. Let's talk about now this button, which is why I went from general fund to health insurance, is because I didn't have this checked and it was going by account name. So if I check that box, and of course I did that, and now it's taken away my options that I had already filled in because I didn't save first. So let's do that one more time. We're doing 15,000 equal monthly amounts. It's filled it all in again, and I'm going to click Save. And now it's taking me to the next expense account that was on the list. So that's by number here. So other deductions, I can fill that in. Let's say I don't want to budget that one. I can just use this arrow to skip to the next one. Here's housing. Let's say I need to fill in housing information for the what we pay for a pastor. So let's go ahead and use prior year actuals on that and fill that in. We're going to click save. It's going to advance to my next one, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I can go down this list and I can use all of these options to get whatever I want. So I can base it on prior year's actuals, prior year's budgets. I can change it by a percentage. I can just directly copy the prior year's actuals or budgets, or I can use that equal monthly amounts. I could also leave it on none and just type in for each month what I think it should be. So that's some of the options I have. So let's pretend that I've filled this all in the way I want it to, and you'll see that when I come back to the screen, the ones that I did fill in are showing up. I could then obviously export or print this information to present to the council and say, hey, is this exactly what you want? Are there any tweaks we need to do, et cetera, and so forth. You'll see also that I can filter and say I want to see only ones that I haven't budgeted yet, so that I could get down the list quicker and don't have to go through. Or I want to see only the ones that have already been budgeted, so I can get that list printed for the council. So like if there are ones that you don't budget, you might want to be printing this out, but you don't want to print out the not budgeted ones, so then you can do that. So you have all of those options in terms of what you want to do. We only want the active ones. And here again, you can switch between books and you can switch between account types. So if you don't want to do dedicated accounts or you only want to budget expense accounts, you can just do that too, so that you're seeing just the ones you want to work on. So that's the main budgeting view. Another way that you could handle this is using this budget import export view. So you could export your 2024 budgets, and then you get, say, let's see all of our 2024 budgets. I want to have that, and I want, let's say current year budgets. I only want expense, or I want all, or I want whatever. Let's say I only want to see my expenses, and I'm just going to do the ones that don't have anything assigned, and I'm going to hit export, and then I get a spreadsheet here, and I could use this as a basis to create a new one that I could then import, where I could change it to 2025, override any existing budget amounts there, import that spreadsheet with the ones that I used from before and updated. And then, so you could do it either by yearly total or by each individual month. So you have kind of different ways to do that. Let's see, what else do I need to show you? Okay, so budget versus actuals. This view is going to show you for whatever fiscal year you've selected. You'll see a column for the budget for January and a column for the actuals for January, and all the way down the line for each month. And then as you get down to the end, you'll see, well, okay, we don't have any actuals yet for the last part of November and for December, so that's not all filled in. But here's your totals of budget and your totals of your actuals, your budgets less your actuals on each of these. So it kind of gives you an overview of how you're doing against your budget. There's also reports that you can use under other reports for similar data. So let's say you could also see just budgets less actual here. So this is your net against your budget for each month. You have other options as well, but that's one of the good views you can use. But under reports here, you can also see, say your treasurer's report is going to give you some budget information, your actuals versus your budgets, your actuals for the current period, and then your actuals and budgets for year to date. So if we're talking about the period being November, you can see some of your budget information against your actuals here as well. So here's November's actuals, here's the full actuals so far this year through the end of November, and then here's your budgets. So there's a lot of different ways you can report. There's a lot of different formats for this report. So Just if you look here, I just would recommend looking at all of them, but here's that all months actuals versus budgets, which is going to look a lot like that view that we were just looking at in the budgets versus actuals. So it's going to give you your budgets and actuals, your budget versus your actuals for each of the accounts for each of the months across the top. So there's a lot of different ways that you can get information about your budgets here. Let's look at current month year-to-date budget remaining. This is one that you probably used a lot in an older version of Shepherd Staff that was just called your statement of income and expense. But now it's a version of the treasurer's report that'll give you your budget and actuals, the percentage, and the remaining budget for the current month and for the year-to-date. So you've got a lot of those options here. Let's pipe right back over here for a second and look at the period analysis. It's related. So I just want you to be able to see it because you can do your income and expense here, and it's going to show you, let's say you could aggregate by your major group or your responsibility codes, and you could see, so let's say by major group, here's your expenses by month for, there we go, for the last 5 calendar years. So you can see all of that information in your period analysis. And let's see, oh, one other report, budget worksheet. And that's one that you can use by income, expense, or dedicated. You'll see the view. So let's say level of detail that we just want to see by major and minor group, for example. And then we can do it by name and then number, or number and then name. And we're going to have the accounts grouped by account type, and we're going to view that. So here's your income accounts, your expense accounts, and it lets you create a little worksheet where you can fill in what you want your next year's budgets to be. So that is, I think I've covered everything on my list. So let me open it up to questions. I'm going to take a look. Oh, pardon me. Let me actually talk about the quiz here. Come on. Whoops, not the beginning. Pardon me. Okay, well, I went backwards. Pardon me. There we go, quiz. So our first question, is it true or false? Books and funds, or funds in finance, are accounts connected to the funds and contributions. True or false? And I'm going to open that up here. Where'd my tools go? There's a poll that's going to pop up in your view here. Launch. And you'll be able to answer that question. And I'll give that a little bit of time here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end that poll. It looks like we got a 50-50 split of what people have answered. So let's look at what our answer is. And it's false. A book or a fund and finance module is the accounting entity for your church. It's where your chart of account. It's what holds your whole chart of accounts. Accounts within a book or fund can be connected to your funds and the contributions module, but the book or fund itself is your whole chart of accounts, your whole set of books. So share that result, close the poll. And let's look at our next question. An account's beginning balance can be edited up until a transaction attributed to the account has been reconciled. And I believe I failed to mention this. I apologize, but I will go ahead and launch that poll, and you can let me know what you think, and then we will talk about it a little more. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, and we'll take a look at that. Whoop, back over here. And that's also false. So the beginning balance can be edited up until a transaction has been done against that account. Once that transaction is created, you can't change the beginning balance anymore. It's one of the reasons why it's a big deal to make sure that you really, really need to enter a beginning balance rather than a transaction to establish a beginning balance. I apologize for not talking about that when we were creating that first account. I will go ahead and close that poll, and we will go on to the next one. So next question, true or false? Dedicated accounts are zeroed out at the end of the year and can be budgeted. So I'm going to open that poll. And it looks like nobody's fooling you guys on this one. Pretty much everybody has had about the same idea. I'm going to give a little more time. Okay. So I'll go ahead and share the results of people's choices on that one, and we'll look at that. And that one's also false. It was kind of tricky because we included two things in there, but the dedicated accounts, their balances carry out over however many years that account exists, but you can budget them. So you can budget the incoming and outgoing money for a dedicated account, but the balances will never start over at zero unless you zero them out somehow with a journal entry or something. So we will close that poll. We will go to the next one. Budgets can be added and edited at any time during the fiscal year. So let's take a look at that one. And launch poll. All right, it looks like everybody's in agreement on that one. And that is true. You can add for the upcoming fiscal year, and you can edit up until the current fiscal year is closed. So we'll go ahead and share those results. Everybody did great. Let's go to the next one, which is payroll taxes. Those withholdings. Would those most likely use an equity account? So let's see what you guys think about that one. Looking at that poll, give it a little longer. Okay. Another couple of seconds here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share those results, and we'll look at the answer. And that one's also false. Since payroll taxes are considered a debt to be paid to the government, we're withholding it from the paycheck so that we can then pay it on to the government. Those should be a liability. Okay, so That's all of our quiz questions. Thank you for the pain and suffering. I know that's not the most fun doing a quiz. So let's go ahead and take a look at any questions you might have out there. I see it looks like Taylor has already answered one question from Harold about adding a CD, and he said, "Is it okay to put in a beginning balance?" And Taylor's answered, and I'll read it all out because it's a very good answer, very thorough. "If you were depositing that initial amount from another account, I'd recommend showing that movement of money. But if it's an already existing account, then a beginning balance can be entered. You'll want to report on it as closely as it happened in real life." So that is one that Taylor's already answered for Harold. Looks like Harold's got another question here. Oh, he was saying that it is a new account and the check was directly deposited. So I did put in a beginning balance. Is that okay? And I would say, Harold, that if you if you used a check and it was deposited into that account, then you probably want to reflect that check payment as well as the money being received. So if you haven't already done anything else in that account and you can change it, you might want to go back and create a journal entry or a something that shows that you wrote that check was written and that it was deposited into that account. Let's see. And Lisa says, "We've never used the finance module in our church. We only have a committee that counts the offerings and adds that to the contributions module and fills out a bank deposit." Okay, they'd like to start using the finance module. Would that committee just add the deposit slip info into the finance module? We plan on having the treasurer come in and add all expense info from his checkbook. Okay, so yes, Lisa, you can start using it. If you've got it already in your system, you might as well make use of it. But what you would do, if you create your chart of accounts, you can, in the contributions module, pardon me, set up each of the offering funds that you have to correspond to whatever bank account and income account that they should be attributed to. And then whenever they create their offering batch and they post it, it can automatically create a deposit for you in the finance module, so you don't even have to do that manually. If you'd like some help with that and help getting set up, please give us a call. We'll be happy to help you with that. Were there any other questions? Let's see. It looks like, oh, I see. From United Lutheran Church, if you're entering balances for a first time, do you enter an equity balance? So can you give me a little more information about what you mean in terms of what balances you're trying to enter? Are you creating a new account? I'll tell you what, if you'd like, we can take that offline and I can reach out to you after the webinar so that we can, I'll send you an email and you can give me a little more details there so that we can be sure to get you a good answer for that. Okay, yeah, if you're using it for the first time, I'll definitely send you an email so that you can kind of tell me a little bit more about what you're trying to do and what you'd like to see, and we'll help you get that set up, absolutely. Looks like we have come to the end of our questions. So I just want to say thank you ever so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time and your patience with me. I will let you get on with your day. Some of you, I'm sure, I will see again in a little while when we do our next onboarding to look at transactions. So I hope until then that you have a wonderful time, and I appreciate it. Thank you.